Hello and welcome back to the INOR's International Research Crash Course. This is Habiba Sami and I'm part of the Data Collection Committee as well as the Guidance and Mentoring Committee. This is part 2 of the data collection methods which has been prepared by my colleague Nishitha and myself. Our previous video discussed primary data collection, so this video is going to look at secondary data collection. So secondary data collection is basically any data that has not been collected by you. It was already collected by someone else as their primary data, and you reused it in your research as secondary data. We're now going to look at some examples as well as the pros and cons of each example. Our first example is literature review. This is you and your data collection team collecting data from previous research publications or books, for example, which are relevant to your research. This form of data collection is essential to almost every research, and we're going to talk about why in a minute. Next, we have medical records. These can be paper-based or electronic, and they're all data recorded on a patient in hospital or clinic, for example. Government publications are the nationwide studies conducted and published by the government. They're mostly used for statistics, especially in the introduction part of your research paper. Websites are also very useful when writing your introduction. Global websites like the WHO or the CDC are good examples for credible websites, and in the coming videos we will be addressing how to decide which websites to use. Now let's look at the pros and cons of each one of these methods. Literature review is pretty inexpensive and very accessible since you can find them online. Now the big advantage is that it gives you a solid background that will give you a good idea on how attractive your research will be. Are you actually addressing a gap of knowledge or not? It will help you build your objectives and rationale, so it's definitely a great place to start your research once you have an idea in mind. However, reading and searching and filtering all the papers and books may prove to be time-consuming and may be difficult if there has not been much research done on the topic you have in mind. Medical records are great for collecting data on many patients at once, and is especially efficient if they're electronic. They spare you the time it takes to collect first-hand data through questionnaires, for example. On the other hand, the fact that there might be some missing data in some records or the data is not collected in a manner specific to your research may give you a hard time. Also, if more than one hospital is involved and records are not standardized, you might face some difficulties in collection and analysis. Government publications and websites were very similar in their uses and are also pretty similar in their pros and cons. They're online sources, so are inexpensive and easily accessible. Their big pro is that they provide nationwide or even global statistics which are very hard to obtain otherwise. However, there is the issue of validity. Governments tend to underreport crimes or unemployment percentages, for example. Now, here is a summary of what we've talked about in our two videos. These two diagrams summarize the advantages and disadvantages of primary and secondary forms of data collection. You will see that both types are almost opposites. If one is time-saving, the other is time-consuming, etc. You're not limited in your research to one type. It depends on which part of the research you're working on. For example, as we said, websites and government publications are pretty useful for your intro. Literature review is important for almost every aspect of your research. These can be used alongside a questionnaire as a primary method of data collection, for example. So find the most convenient method for each part and also take your budget into consideration. This is again a recap of the table we explained in our first video. Take a look at it and it should be pretty easy to comprehend now that we've looked at each type in detail. Finally, be sure to follow us on our social media accounts to stay updated with everything we do. And if you've got any questions, you can always contact me or Nishitha and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you very much and good luck on your research journey.